The 1950s weren't just about tail fins and chrome. They were an era of automotive experimentation that pushed the boundaries of what we thought cars could be. While everyone knows the '57 Chevy and the Thunderbird, today we're diving into the shadows of automotive history to uncover 20 revolutionary cars that time almost forgot. But before we start this journey through automotive history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to catch all our upcoming classic car content. Number 20. The Panhard Dynavia of 1948. Now, I know what you're thinking. 48 isn't technically the 50s, but this car was so ahead of its time it deserves a spot on our list. This French marvel looked more like something from a science fiction movie than a post-war automobile. When most cars were still shaped like bricks with wheels, Panhard created something with a drag coefficient of just 0.26. That's better than many modern cars today. The teardrop shape wasn't just for show. It was pure aerodynamic science. The Dynavia could reach speeds of 130 kilometers per hour, using just a tiny 610 cubic centimeter two-cylinder engine. That's the same size engine you'd find in a modern motorcycle. But here's the truly mind-blowing part. It could achieve 3.5 liters per 100 kilometers, or about 67 miles per gallon. Some hybrid cars today struggle to match that efficiency. Inside, it was just as revolutionary. The panoramic windshield and windows provided incredible visibility, while the central driving position, yes, like the McLaren F1, gave the driver a commanding view of the road. So why haven't you heard of it? Well, like many innovations ahead of their time, it was just too radical for the market. Only one was ever built, but its influence on automotive aerodynamics can't be overstated. Elements of its design would later appear in everything from the Citroën DS to modern electric vehicles. Stay tuned, because if you think this is impressive, wait until you see what's coming up at number 7 on our list. Number 19. The 1954 Fiat Turbina. Imagine a time when jet engines were the future of everything, even family cars. That's exactly what Fiat was thinking when they created this revolutionary prototype. Looking like it just rolled off a spaceship assembly line, the Turbina wasn't named for show. This sleek red marvel packed a real gas turbine engine, the same basic technology used in jet airplanes. The Type 8001 turbine could spin up to an absolutely insane 22,000 RPM. For comparison, your average car today redlines at around 6,000 RPM. But here's where it gets really interesting. The engine produced 300 horsepower, impressive even by today's standards. But that's not the crazy part. This thing had no gearbox. Zero. Nada. The turbine engine delivered power directly to the wheels through a simple reduction system. During testing at Fiat's legendary Lingotto rooftop track in Turin, the Turbina reached speeds of 250 kilometers per hour, or about 155 miles per hour. In 1954, that's supercar territory, folks. The interior was just as forward-thinking. 3 across seating, aircraft-inspired controls, and a dashboard that looked more like a plane's cockpit than a car's console. Even the steering wheel was aviation-inspired. Number 18. The 1953 Gabriel Voisin C31 Biscooter, a car that redefined the meaning of luxury minimalism. Now picture post-war France. Resources are scarce, fuel is expensive, but people still need to get around. Enter Gabriel Voisin, a former aircraft designer and luxury car maker, who had a rather unusual solution. At first glance, the Biscooter looks like someone forgot to finish building it. But that's exactly what made it genius. Weighing just 330 pounds, yes, you heard that right, this tiny aluminum marvel could carry 2 people and their luggage while sipping fuel like it was expensive champagne. But here's where Voisin's aircraft background really shines through. The entire body was made from aircraft-grade aluminum. The seats? Aircraft canvas. Even the controls were aircraft-inspired. It's basically what happens when you ask an aviation engineer to build the world's most efficient car. Check this out. The steering wheel could be mounted on either side of the car. Need to drive on the right side of the road? No problem. Left side, just move the wheel over. It's like having two cars in one, except it's barely the size of half a car. Powered by a tiny 125 cubic centimeter engine, producing a whopping 5.5 horsepower, the Biscooter wasn't going to win any drag races. But that wasn't the point. This little engine could push the car to 40 miles per hour while delivering up to 100 miles per gallon. In 1953, some modern cars are still trying to match that efficiency. The marketing slogan was brilliant: the minimum car for the maximum man. Unfortunately, the maximum man of 1953 wasn't quite ready for this minimum car. Despite its ingenious design, the Biscooter was too Spartan even for post-war Europe. But look at today's minimalist electric vehicles and lightweight city cars. Voisin was on to something. He just happened to be about 70 years too early. Number 17. The 1950 Nardi 750 Sagittario, where race car engineering met street-legal dreams. While Ferrari and Maserati were grabbing headlines, a brilliant engineer named Enrico Nardi was quietly revolutionizing sports car design in a small workshop in Turin. And this, the 750 Sagittario, was his masterpiece. Look at those lines. It's like someone shrunk a Le Mans race car and made it street legal. But this wasn't just about looks. Nardi, who previously worked as Enzo Ferrari's test driver, knew a thing or two about making cars fast. The secret? A space-frame chassis that weighed practically nothing, wrapped in hand-formed aluminum bodywork. The entire car weighed just 1,100 pounds. That's about half the weight of a modern Miata. And remember, this is 1950 we're talking about. Under that sculpted hood sat a tiny 750cc Crosley engine. Now, before you laugh, here's where it gets interesting. Nardi modified this little power plant with twin overhead camshafts and a supercharger. The result? 55 horsepower from an engine smaller than most motorcycle engines today. But with that featherweight chassis, it was enough to hit 110 miles per hour. More importantly, it could corner like nothing else on the road, thanks to its perfect weight distribution and innovative suspension design. Inside, it was pure race car. Bucket seats, minimal gauges, and a wood-rimmed steering wheel that would make any modern sports car enthusiast jealous. This wasn't transportation. This was pure driving passion distilled into metal and leather. Sadly, only 3 Sagittarios were ever built, but its influence lived on. You can see its DNA in everything from the Lotus Elite to modern track day specials. It proved that lightweight construction and perfect balance could beat raw horsepower any day. Number 16. The 1950 Gazzo 4000 Sport, the Dutch supercar that almost changed everything. In a country better known for windmills and wooden shoes, Maurice Gatsonides had a dream: to build the fastest, most advanced sports car in Europe. And for a brief moment, he actually did it. Just look at this beauty. Those flowing fenders, that massive grille, the aircraft-inspired cockpit. This wasn't just a car, it was automotive art. But unlike many beautiful cars of the era, the Gazzo had the muscle to back up its looks. Under that long hood sat something special: a 4.0-liter Lycoming aircraft engine, the same type used in small planes. Yes, you heard that right. An actual aircraft engine. Producing 120 horsepower, it could push this aluminum-bodied beast to over 120 miles per hour. In 1950, that was supercar territory. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Gazzo featured independent suspension all around, a rarity in 1950. It also had a unique semi-automatic transmission that could be shifted without using the clutch. Remember, this is decades before paddle shifters were a thing. Inside, it was pure luxury meets racing functionality. Hand-stitched leather seats, a dashboard full of aircraft-style gauges, and that gorgeous three-spoke steering wheel. The attention to detail was incredible. Even the door handles were custom designed to reduce wind resistance. Gazzanides wasn't just a builder, he was a racer. He drove the Gazzo to victory in several European races, proving it wasn't just about looks. The car could genuinely compete with the best from Italy and Britain. So why haven't you heard of it? Well, like many brilliant innovations, it came down to money. Each car was essentially hand-built, making it incredibly expensive to produce. Only 3 were ever completed, and only 1 survives today. But think about it. A small Dutch company created a car that could compete with Ferrari and Maserati. It's like if a startup today decided to take on Tesla and actually succeeded. Number 15. The 1958 DAF 600. The little Dutch car that changed how we drive forever. Picture yourself in 1958. Most people are still wrestling with manual transmissions, grinding gears, and stalling at stoplights. Then along comes this unassuming little car from the Netherlands that completely revolutionizes driving. Now, I know what you're thinking. It looks pretty ordinary. But under that modest exterior lies one of the most innovative transmissions ever created, the Variomatic. This is where it gets fascinating, folks. Instead of traditional gears, the DF 600 used something called a continuously variable transmission, or CVT. Picture 2 pairs of pulleys connected by rubber belts that could infinitely adjust their diameter. It's like having an infinite number of gears. Here's the really clever part. The system was completely automatic and stepless. No jerky gear changes, no clutch pedal, just smooth, continuous acceleration. And get this, it could go just as fast in reverse as it could forward. Yes, you could theoretically win a race driving backward. Inside, instead of a gear shift, you had just 2 positions, forward and reverse. That's it. It was so simple that driving schools in the Netherlands started using DAFs as training cars. If you couldn't drive a DAF, you probably shouldn't be driving at all. Now, with its 600cc twin-cylinder engine producing just 22 horsepower, the DAF 600 wasn't exactly a speed demon, but that wasn't the point. This was about making driving accessible to everyone. And it worked. DAF sold over 30,000 units in just the first 3 years. Look at any modern car with a CVT transmission. From Toyota, to Nissan, to Honda. They're all following in DAF's footsteps. This tiny Dutch company basically invented the technology that would become the foundation for millions of cars today. But perhaps the most incredible part, the company that made this revolutionary car started out making trucks and trailers. It's like if U-Haul suddenly decided to revolutionize electric vehicles. Number 14. The 1948 Tucker 48. The car that was too advanced for its own good. Before we dive in, I know what you're saying. That's not from the 1950s. But the Tucker 48's influence stretched well into the 50s and beyond, making it impossible to ignore in any discussion of revolutionary cars. Just look at it. That third headlight in the center that turned with the steering wheel. The sleek, aerodynamic design. The pop-out windshield designed to eject during a crash. This wasn't just a car, it was Preston Tucker's vision of the future. Let's talk about those safety innovations. Padded dashboard? Tucker did it first. Shatterproof windshield? Tucker. Roll bar built into the roof? You guessed it, Tucker. This car had safety features that wouldn't become standard until decades later. But here's where it gets really interesting. The engine? It was in the back. a massive 335 cubic inch flat-six helicopter engine, modified for automotive use. It was air-cooled, another innovation that Porsche would later make famous. And get this, it produced 166 horsepower and could push this safety-focused sedan to 120 miles per hour. Inside, it was like stepping into the future. The dashboard was crash-padded. The steering box was behind the front axle to protect the driver in a collision. Even the parking brake had a separate key, so valets couldn't joyride with your car. But as we all know, the Tucker story doesn't have a happy ending. Only 51 cars were built before the company folded amidst controversy and legal troubles. Some say it was a conspiracy by the big three automakers. Others blame financial mismanagement. But look at any modern car. The safety features we take for granted today. Tucker thought of them first. Crumple zones, padded interiors, safety glass. All standard equipment on the Tucker 48. And here's a mind-blowing fact. Of the 51 Tuckers built, 47 still exist today. That's a 92% survival rate, unheard of for cars of this era. Maybe Preston Tucker was right about that safety stuff after all. Number 13. The 1955 Tatra T603. The Czech luxury car that dared to be different. While Western Europe was building conventional luxury cars, behind the Iron Curtain, Czechoslovakian manufacturer Tatra was creating something truly extraordinary. Just look at this masterpiece of aerodynamic design. 3 headlights, a sloping fastback, and a dorsal fin that would make a shark jealous. The real magic? It was all functional. Every curve, every line was backed by scientific wind tunnel testing. Let's start at the back, because that's where things get really interesting. Like the Tucker, the T603 had its engine in the rear. But this wasn't just any engine. It was an air-cooled V8. A 2.5-liter aluminum masterpiece that produced 95 horsepower and sounded like nothing else on the road. That distinctive shape wasn't just for show. The T603 had a drag coefficient of 0.36, impressive even by today's standards. Those 3 headlights? The center one turned with the steering wheel, just like modern adaptive headlights. Inside, it was pure luxury. Communist style. 6 people could sit comfortably thanks to a completely flat floor. The front seats could fold flat to make a bed. And check this out. There were separate heating controls for each side of the car. In 1955. That's right. Dual-zone climate control before most cars even had a heater. Despite weighing over 3,300 pounds, the T603 could hit 100 miles per hour. But here's the really impressive part. It could maintain that speed all day long on rough roads, thanks to its advanced suspension system. Now, here's the catch. Unless you were a high-ranking communist official or a friendly foreign diplomat, you couldn't buy one. Only 20,422 were built over 20 years, and most never left the Eastern Bloc. But look at any modern rear-engined car, from the Porsche 911 to the Smart Fortwo. They're all following a path that Tatra helped pioneer. Some even say Porsche's early designs were, let's say, inspired by Tatra's work. Number 12. The 1935 to 1955 Stout Scarab, the world's first minivan, designed by an aircraft engineer. Now, I know what you're thinking. 1935 isn't the 1950s, but production continued into the early 50s, and its influence was so massive we simply can't ignore it. Take a good look at this radical machine. If you think it looks like something from a sci-fi movie, you're not alone. But William Stout, its creator, wasn't trying to make a movie prop. He was reinventing the automobile from the ground up. Here's where it gets fascinating. The Scarab was built on a unibody chassis. Decades before this became industry standard. The engine? In the rear, driving the back wheels. The interior, completely modular. Sound familiar? That's because every minivan today follows this basic blueprint. But the interior, this is where things get really wild. The seats could be rearranged into any configuration you wanted. The table in the middle could be used for meetings or meals. The rear seat could even become a bed. Remember, this is the 1930s and 40s we're talking about. Check this out. It had independent suspension at all four corners when most cars still used solid axles. The doors were on the right side only, with the front door opening conventionally and the rear door sliding back, just like modern minivans. That bubble shape wasn't just for looks. The Scarab had a drag coefficient that would be respectable even today. Those rounded corners and flush windows, they weren't common until the 1980s. Here's the catch. Each Scarab was hand-built and cost around $5,000, about the same as 5 regular cars at the time. Only 9 were ever made, but their influence is everywhere. Look at any modern minivan. The sliding door, the flexible seating, the rear engine in some cases. It all started here. The Chrysler minivan of the 1980s might have popularized the concept, but Stout invented it 40 years earlier. Number 11. The 1954 Moretti 750 Grand Sport, the lightweight champion that could have changed sports car history. While Ferrari was building fire-breathing V12s and Maserati was crafting luxury Grand Tourers, a small company in Turin was taking a completely different approach to performance. Look at this stunning little machine. It's smaller than a modern Mazda Miata, but don't let its size fool you. This is one of the most innovative sports cars of the 1950s. Here's where Moretti was truly revolutionary. The entire car weighed just 1,100 pounds. That's half the weight of most modern sports cars. How did they do it? Aluminum body panels, a tube frame chassis, and something really clever. They used the body panels as structural elements. Now the engine might seem tiny, just 750 cubic centimeters, but this little twin-cam marvel could rev to 7,500 RPM and produced 65 horsepower. That's 87 horsepower per liter. In 1954. Even modern, naturally aspirated engines struggle to match that. Thanks to its featherweight construction, the Moretti could hit 110 miles per hour and accelerate from 0 to 60 in about 12 seconds. Not impressive today, but remember, this was using 1954 technology and an engine smaller than most motorcycle engines. Inside, it was pure racing minimalism. 2 bucket seats, a wood-rimmed steering wheel, and just the essential gauges. No radio, no heater, not even a glove box. This was a pure driver's car decades before. That became a marketing slogan. The Moretti didn't just look fast, it was a serious competition machine. It won its class at the Mille Miglia and took victories at numerous other European races. All this with an engine smaller than a bottle of wine. Look at cars like the Lotus Elise or Alpine A110. They're following the same philosophy Moretti pioneered. Lightweight beats raw power. It just took the rest of the industry 60 years to figure this out. Number 10. The 1956 Astronome, the time and space car that defined tomorrow's yesterday. At the 1956 International Automobile Show in New York, one car stopped everyone in their tracks. It wasn't just a car. It was industrial designer Richard Arbeeb's vision of how we'd all be traveling in 1970. Just look at this incredible machine. With its bubble canopy, fins, and chrome-laden spaceship styling. It looks like something straight out of the Jetsons. But here's the fascinating part. It was actually built on a Nash Metropolitan chassis. The most striking feature? That massive plexiglass bubble top. It wasn't just for show. It could slide forward electrically for entry and exit. But here's the clever bit. When parked, it could be raised and used as a weather shield. Think of it as the world's first built-in car umbrella. Step inside, and you're in what Arbib called a time and space chamber. The seats were covered in metallic fabric that changed color depending on the lighting. The dashboard had no less than 15 illuminated dials and a radio telephone. In 1956, and check this out, built-in perfume dispenser to keep the cabin fresh. Storage was revolutionary too. The car had 57 cubic feet of luggage space, more than many modern SUVs. It achieved this through clever time and space compartments hidden throughout the body. Even the wheel covers doubled as storage pods. Those strange-looking pods on the sides, rotating colored lights that created what Arbib called a planetarium effect at night. The car had fiber optic lighting decades before it became common in luxury vehicles. Now, only one Astronome was ever built, but its influence on car design was enormous. Those hidden storage compartments? Look at any modern car's clever storage solutions. The bubble canopy? Tesla's panoramic roofs aren't so different. And think about this. Features we take for granted today, like built-in phones, ambient lighting, and maximized storage space were all previewed in this car over 65 years ago. Number 9. The 1957 Aurora Safety Car. The vehicle that tried to make accidents obsolete. In an era when car safety meant try not to hit anything, Catholic priest Father Alfred Giuliano had a revolutionary idea. What if we designed a car that was actually meant to crash? Now, I know what you're thinking. It looks like a catfish had a baby with a spaceship. But every bizarre feature of this car was designed with safety in mind. That nose! It wasn't just ugly. It was a built-in crash cage with a rubber bumper designed to absorb impacts. Let's talk innovations. Double-layered bumpers filled with shock-absorbing material. A roll cage built into the roof. Side impact protection bars. Seat belts that were anchored to the roll cage. All standard equipment today. All revolutionary in 1957. Inside, it gets even more interesting. The steering wheel was cushioned and would collapse in a crash. The dashboard was padded and had no sharp edges. The seats were mounted on swivels so they'd turn away from the point of impact in a collision. Even the glass was designed to pop out instead of shattering. That bubble canopy wasn't just for looks. It provided nearly 360-degree visibility. The windshield was curved both horizontally and vertically to eliminate blind spots. Those weird fenders? They had built-in guide lights so you could see exactly where your wheels were. Here's something wild. In a severe crash, the entire engine and transmission would slide under the car rather than into the passenger compartment. In 1957, some modern cars still haven't figured this out. Sadly, only one Aurora was ever built at a cost of $30,000. That's about $300,000 in today's money. The prototype was so poorly constructed it barely ran, and Father Giuliano went bankrupt trying to promote it. But look at any modern car's safety features. Crumple zones, collapsible steering columns, side impact protection. The Aurora thought of them first. It might have looked weird, but it was decades ahead of its time. Number 8. The 1941 to 1950 Chrysler Thunderbolt, the car that made hardtops disappear. Before we dive in, yes, this car debuted in '41, but it continued influencing design well into the '50s, and its innovations. We're still using them today. Just look at this masterpiece. Those smooth, unbroken lines, that curved glass, and its party piece. A fully retractable hardtop that disappeared completely into the trunk, decades before the Mercedes SLK made it famous. Watch this. At the push of a button, the solid metal roof would split in two, then slide back and tuck itself away completely out of sight. No fabric, no manual latches, just smooth electrical operation. In the 1940s, this wasn't just advanced, It was science fiction made real. The name Thunderbolt wasn't just marketing. This was one of the first American cars designed in a wind tunnel. Those flush door handles, they wouldn't become common until the 1980s. The hidden headlights, they set a trend that lasted decades. Step inside and you'll find more innovations. Power windows, still a novelty in the 40s. An electro-hydraulic system that could raise and lower the windows, operate the top, and even open the doors. There was even a prototype heating and air conditioning system. Under that streamlined hood sat Chrysler's legendary 323.5 cubic inch straight 8 engine, producing 143 horsepower. But here's the clever part. The engine was tilted slightly to keep the hood line low, another innovation we still see today. Only 5 Thunderbolts were built, each one slightly different. The project was interrupted by World War II, and by the time peace returned, the design was already considered dated, but its influence lived on. Look at any modern, retractable hardtop convertible, from the Mercedes SL to the BMW Z4. They're all following the path the Thunderbolt blazed. It took the industry 50 years to catch up to what Chrysler had already figured out. Number 7, the 1955. And here's the clever part. If you got into a front-end crash, custom-made Becker Mexico unit that cost as much as some cars. Now here's where it gets interesting. BMW planned to sell the 507 for $5,000 in America. But production costs spiraled out of control. Final price? $9,000. That's more than a Rolls-Royce of the time. In today's money? About $90,000. Only 252 were ever built, and BMW lost money on every single one. The project nearly bankrupted the company. But here's the irony. Today, these cars are worth millions. Elvis Presley owned 2 of them. Look at the BMW Z8 from 2000, or even today's Z4. They're all trying to recapture the magic of the 507. Some say it's the most beautiful BMW ever made. Number 3, the 1954 Nash Metropolitan, the first American compact car that nobody thought would work. In an era when American cars were getting bigger every year, Nash Motors had a radical idea. What if we built a small car? Not just small by American standards, actually small. Look at this little charmer, at just 149 inches long. That's shorter than a modern Mini Cooper. The Metropolitan was positively tiny by 1950s standards. But those cute proportions hide a revolutionary approach to car making. Here's where it gets fascinating. Nash did something unthinkable at the time. They outsourced production to England. The body was built by Fisher & Ludlow. The engine came from Austin, and final assembly was done by BMC. Global manufacturing decades before it became common. Under that tiny hood sat a 1.2-liter Austin engine, later upgraded to 1.5 liters. It made just 42 horsepower, but here's the clever bit. The car only weighed 1,785 pounds. It could hit 75 miles per hour and get up to 40 miles per gallon. In 1954, inside, it was surprisingly roomy. The bench seat could fit 3 people, if they were good friends. The trunk, accessible only from inside the car. And check this out. The passenger seat would fold flat to make a bed. Perfect for drive-in movies. Detroit executives laughed at the Metropolitan. Americans will never buy a small car, they said. But Nash had the last laugh. They sold over 95,000 of them. Turns out there was a market for small, efficient cars after all. The Metropolitan became a cultural icon. It appeared in movies, TV shows, and even fashion magazines. It was one of the first cars marketed specifically to women, with 2-tone paint schemes matching popular lipstick colors. Look at today's market for small, efficient city cars. Smart for 2, Fiat 500. even the Mini Cooper. They're all following a path the Metropolitan blazed 70 years ago. Number 2. The 1954 Borgward Isabella. A luxury car that proved innovation doesn't always survive. While Mercedes and BMW were rebuilding their factories, a lesser-known company in Bremen was creating something revolutionary. A car that combined American style with German engineering in ways nobody had seen before. Just look at those lines. The low-slung hood, the elegant greenhouse, those subtle fins. It's like someone took the best elements of American and European design and blended them perfectly. But the real innovations were under that beautiful skin. Here's where Borgward was truly ahead of its time. Independent suspension all around, with coil springs, not leaf springs. A synchronized 4-speed manual transmission when most cars still had 3 speeds. Even the engine was revolutionary. A 1.5-liter unit with an aluminum head, producing 60 horsepower. The body construction was incredibly advanced. Unibody design, when most cars still use separate frames. Crumple zones front and rear. In 1954. Even the door handles were aerodynamically integrated into the body. Step inside, and you'll find more innovations. The seats used rubber suspension, an early form of ergonomic design. The dashboard was padded for safety. There was even a fresh air ventilation system that didn't require opening the windows. The Isabella could cruise at 80 miles per hour all day long and return 30 miles per gallon. In 1954, it could accelerate from 0 to 60 in 17 seconds, respectable for its time, and handle like a much sportier car. Borgward built over 200,000 Isabellas, but the company's innovative spirit proved to be its undoing. Development costs for new models and ambitious engineering led to financial troubles, and the company closed in 1961. Look at any modern European luxury car. The emphasis on safety, efficiency, and sophisticated suspension design. The Isabella was doing all of this decades ago. Number 1. The 1956 SAAB 93, when aircraft engineers decided to build a car. Imagine asking aircraft engineers to design a car. That's exactly what happened when SAAB, the Swedish aircraft manufacturer, decided to enter the automobile market. Look at this masterpiece of aerodynamic design. That curved windshield, the teardrop shape, those integrated fenders. It's basically an aircraft wing on wheels. But the real innovation was how they thought about car design completely differently. Here's where it gets fascinating. The 93 had a drag coefficient of just 0.32. That's better than many modern cars. Those aircraft engineers understood something car designers didn't. Air doesn't care whether it's flowing over a plane or a car. The engine, it's in the front, but mounted backwards. A 3-cylinder, 2-stroke unit that sounded like nothing else on the road. And get this, it had a freewheeling clutch, meaning you could take your foot off the gas and coast without engine braking, just like an aircraft gliding. Safety? SAAB was decades ahead. 93 had a reinforced passenger compartment, safety windscreen, seatbelts as standard, in 1956. Even the door handles were designed to minimize injury in a crash. But here's where SAAB's aircraft experience really showed. The 93 was tested in Arctic conditions. That front-wheel drive layout? Perfect for snow. Those aircraft-grade heaters, they actually worked in Swedish winters. The 93 wasn't just innovative, it was tough. It won rallies across Europe, proving that clever engineering could beat raw power. In 1957, a 93 even won its class at the prestigious Monte Carlo Rally. Look at any modern car with its emphasis on aerodynamics, safety, and winter capability. They're all following principles SAAB established with the 93. It wasn't just a car, it was a complete rethinking of what a car could be. These 20 cars represent more than just interesting designs or clever engineering. They show us that innovation doesn't always come from the biggest companies or the most expensive cars. Sometimes it comes from thinking differently, from challenging conventions, from daring to be unique. The next time someone tells you all the good ideas have been taken, remember these forgotten pioneers. They prove that there's always room for innovation, always space for new ideas, always potential for something revolutionary. Thank you for joining us on this journey through automotive history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And tell us in the comments, which of these cars surprised you the most?